Midnight Motorist is a mini-game in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator in which the drunk abusive father of Fritz, the MCI victim, returns home after hitting the limit at his local bar to find that his son has run away to the one place he's happiest, Freddy's. And in a moment of dramatic irony says he'll be sorry when he gets home. Although the audience knows he'll never come home, because the footprints of the killer, William Afton's Spring Bonnie suit, are in the bushes. Theorists at the time the game came out, including MatPat, didn't figure this out, and thought that the orange guy was William Afton. So, game creator Scott Cawthon made sure to clarify in the next game what was happening, that the footprints outside were William's. In a scene where Toy Chica represents William Afton, Scott explains the way that William caught all of his victims, including how he lured Susie.
I told him that someone ran over his dog in front of my house.
And how he lured Fritz.
I'll just go to his house. And if he doesn't open the door, I'll just find a window.
This is a theory that I put forth 2 years ago in a YouTube video. I wasn't the first to come up with it. In fact, the fandom calls this theory Gabriel Midnight Motorist, whereas I think that the person who ran away is actually Fritz, the Foxy kid, because Foxy runs places. The Five Nights at Freddy's Encyclopedia also lists this as one of the 2 fan theories, the other being that Orange Guy is William. So this theory's been out there for a very long time and is backed up by official FNAF media. This is one of the FNAF theories that I am most confident about. It forms a pattern with the other minigames in FNAF 6 being about people that William killed. It's necessary to view to see the Lorekeeper ending where we see the graves of the children. The main character is orange, which is opposite the color wheel of William's purple, thus showing that he is a foil to William. He's one of the fathers of the kids that William kills. William's suit is redesigned in this game to only have 3 toes, and the footprints in the bushes outside in this game only have 3 toes. And of course, Scott confirmed this theory in the next game because MatPat originally got it wrong.
I'll just go to his house. And if he doesn't open the door, I'll just find a window.
Case closed. This is one of the clearest conclusions we have about any FNAF mystery. Except, my conclusion is very likely wrong. In 2024, for the 10th anniversary of Five Nights at Freddy's, a demo for the racing game 5 Laps at Freddy's came out. The demo is really a beta, it's very glitchy, it has no polish, there's even one of the tracks that you legitimately cannot finish. It's very clear that this demo was rushed out just to have more content for the 10th anniversary. But in 5 Laps at Freddy's, there's a car called the Midnight Motor. It's designed to look the same as William's cars are depicted throughout the franchise. It has a Spring Bonnie decoration at the top of its antenna, and unused text found in the data of the game reads, "Talk about a killer ride. This smooth cruiser is the perfect choice for anyone wanting to flee a crime scene or win a race." The dice in the mirror also spell out 87, although it's also possible that they say OH. I don't want to assume. This official FNAF game seems to be the most straightforward confirmation we've ever had as to the identity of Orange Man. He is William Afton. One of the other minigames in FNAF 6 is a game depicting the death of Charlie. We've already seen this event in FNAF 2 from another perspective, in which we see William in his purple car drive up outside of a Freddy's location and kill Charlie. Now, from the perspective of the puppet, we see Charlie's body in an alleyway, with rain falling down and tire skid marks. The rain used in this minigame is the same as the rain in Midnight Motorist, tying these events together, ending the minigame by seeing tire marks, and then starting the next minigame with the presumed killer in a car, also links these together as taking place on the same night. In this interpretation, the man is orange, because William's other persona, Spring Bonnie, is also orange. The long sought-out answer for Midnight Motorist was confirmed in 5 Laps at Freddy's. It confirms which of the 2 theories in the encyclopedia is correct. I'm wrong. So now what? My name is GiBi, this is Toto, and welcome to the Horror Homestead, where we're going to talk about what to do when you're wrong. I often say that FNAF is not like politics, meaning that there's no reason to want your theory to be correct. I don't have anything to gain by my theory being correct, or anything to lose if it's wrong. The point of examining the lore is to find the truth, and the truth being revealed is a good thing, no matter what. No one should be embarrassed if they're wrong. It's not like people will mass unsubscribe from my channel if my theory video is wrong. I don't want my theory to be correct, I just think that it is. And this is FNAF lore. There are no stakes to being incorrect. Convincing people also doesn't make a theory more likely to be true. Again, it's not politics. the fandom doesn't vote on what becomes canon. A plurality of the community believing that the crying child's name is Evan doesn't change the fact that his name is Dave. So if I'm wrong, then in my next timeline video, I'll use this new information going forward to tell my version of the canon story. When new information comes out, you should accept it as being equal to prior information. You should reevaluate your stance. I've seen people with a tendency to compare what they already believe to new information. What they already believe is based on a long line of old evidence that they've put together and meshed into one big blob of conclusion. So now when new small pieces of counter-evidence come, the big blob of original conclusion overpowers them. Of course their original theory will always win out because it's established. They have so many reasons for thinking it. This new piece of evidence is only one thing. Whereas, if each new time a piece of evidence comes out, you reevaluate from the beginning, you will necessarily come to a different conclusion. You might not flip-flop entirely, but you'll understand that your conclusion will be different than it originally was. You should come to a different conclusion when new evidence comes to light, no matter how slight. Whether you're wrong or right, the goal should be the truth, not defending your reputation. What I've come to learn over the past few years is that a lot of people's conclusions are based not on the quality of evidence, but on their own biases going in. Bias is a very negative sounding word, but I don't mean like nepotism or something. I mean the neutral word bias. I'm going to use this tree of definitions to synthesize what we're going to call bias in this video, which is being likely to have a particular kind of thought. Being an optimist or a pessimist is a kind of bias, because you're more likely to have a particular kind of thought. Assuming that Scott Cawthon is a bad storyteller is a bias. Assuming that Scott is a clear communicator and says what he means is a bias. We recently saw a controversy like this where a Steel Wool employee said that if you've read the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, you don't know the full story. And people who are biased to literal interpretations took that to mean that there literally is a full story, that the books are part of it, and that the upcoming Secret of the Mimic video game is part of it. You can add these together like parts in a puzzle to make a full story. And people who are biased to interpret human speech more metaphorically took it to mean you don't know the full story, as in the phrase, you don't know the full story, which is often used to dispel rumors or misinformation. I heard you kicked a puppy. No, you don't know the full story. It was actually a junkyard dog that was chasing me and my friend. It had already gnawed through his leg, and in order to save him, I had to kick the dog. That's not two parts that add up to a full story. That's incorrect information that somewhat resembles the truth in minor surface-level ways compared to the truth. The full story is a phrase that means the truth. So if you don't know the full story, you don't know the truth. So if the books aren't the full story, the books aren't the truth. If you read this quote from the Steel Wool employee, assuming he was being literal, then your conclusion could be that the books are canon to the games, that they're in the same continuity, because they fit together like puzzle pieces. If you read the quote assuming he was speaking in a more natural way, then your conclusion could be that the books and games are not in the same continuity, because the books were described as not the full story. The full story means the truth, and if the books aren't the full story, then the books aren't true. They're not canon. Neither of these is based on facts or deep analysis or evidence. They're just interpreting the same sentence in different ways based on your bias going in. Matt Pat did a great video on this phenomenon a few years ago because he noticed the high level of toxicity in the fandom, and he wanted to explore why. He concluded that it's difficult for people with these two different biases to effectively communicate with one another. I will play some extended clips from his video now to demonstrate what he said back then, and then we'll add on to it.
All of this is that I went down the line of FNAF theorists, and I just kept seeing the same thing over and over again. It's not just my theories that are getting all this hate, it's all theories. A few weeks ago, I asked a bunch of you online to take the Myers-Briggs personality test. Now, this is a really fun assessment that breaks you down into one of 16 different personality types based on letters. For this particular debate, I actually wanted to focus on two letters, S and N. Now, these two letters focus on how you process information. The S stands for sensing. This means that you take the information from the world around you and you take it at face value. It often means that you look at the world in a very literal way. N, on the other hand, stands for intuition. If you're an N, it means that you interpret information in more abstract ways. Rather than just relying on exactly what's in front of you physically, you take that information and then you go a couple steps further. I think a lot of the newer fans of the franchise are S's. And so when evidence needs to be interpreted with an N mentality, it's making them uncomfortable or even outright mad. Here's the big one, and this is the one that honestly has divided the fan base for the better part of the last year. It is this line used to market the new Tales from the Pizzaplex books. Quote, a collection of new Five Nights at Freddy's short stories set in the world of the newest game. This one line has been used time and time again to say that these tales from the Pizzaplex books, they are 100% canon, one for one with the game's stories. That right there, that is a very S interpretation, a literal interpretation of what's being said. But there's also the N interpretation of that line. I think Rye Toast actually said this one best.
This Super Mario Brothers movie that just came out, that's set in the Mario Brothers universe, 100%, but it's not canon to the games.
It's not an invalid interpretation, it's just a different, less literal interpretation than one that many of you on Reddit are familiar with.
In my own experience, I sent out a tweet saying that the two interpretations of this phrase were equally as likely. It feels like the marketing is designed to make people see what they want to. The quote, "If you read the books, you don't know the full story," 100% read to me like the game is just an adaptation and that the books aren't canon. Apparently, people took it the opposite way. Wild. Books game's interpretation, very literal reading of the quote. The books tell part of the story, but there are massive holes in it. This game, in continuity with the books, will fill in those holes. Books are not canon interpretation, how humans actually talk. What you've read is an inaccurate account of the details. Here's the truth. I'm not sure which one I think is more likely, but since I guess we'll find out soon, I'm not going to use my energy to bother predicting it. I'm just fascinated at how language works. I love words, man. Can't get enough of them. Keep in mind that when I say the way humans actually talk, I'm referring to the fact that humans aren't perfect, rational, logical beings, and sometimes just say words in a way that they aren't literally supposed to be taken. Humans aren't robots, and we make mistakes. When I say human, I mean flawed. This is how flawed things communicate, not robots. People responded saying that the literal interpretation is the correct one because it's literal, which of course misses the point entirely. So what do you do when you've noticed this phenomenon? Well, you can't be non-biased, that's literally impossible. So I believe that what you should do is see your own bias and then try to effectively communicate with people who don't have your same bias. And then you can synthesize those two conclusions. If you meet someone who thinks differently than you, instead of insulting them for being different, you should assume that you're wrong, you should listen to what they have to say, you should internalize it, and then you should stop assuming that you're wrong and synthesize these two perspectives. You should combine them. Truth requires diverse perspectives. The reason I end all of my videos telling people to be Freddy is because friendly, respectful discussion is the only way to learn things. If you're not friendly, you're going to drive people out of the space, and you'll be left with an echo chamber of fools. And if you're not respectful, you're never going to internalize other people's perspectives. You'll be close-minded forever, and that close-mindedness will lock you out of new and better ideas. Good ideas, even. And it's not just about being optimistic or pessimistic, it's not about being literal or more metaphorical. Things as basic as human language can affect the way that you see reality. I've talked about this before, but in English, and if you're watching this, I'm assuming that you at least speak English because, duh. In English, we put the adjective before the noun. The big house, the cute dog, the purple guy. In other languages, like Spanish or French, they put the adjective second. The house big, the dog cute, the guy purple. By prioritizing the adjective over the noun, this changes the way that we mentally map concepts. Here's some very simplified examples. If someone says the big house, you're going to think big things, and then close in on big houses. If someone says cute dog, you're going to think cute things, and then close in on cute dogs. If someone says purple guy, you're going to think purple things, and then close in on William Afton. The other way around is completely different. If someone says the house big, you're going to think of houses, and then close in on a big house. Dog's cute, you're going to think of all dogs, and then a cute dog. Guy purple, you're going to think of all men, and then William Afton. This is a huge difference in the way that people think. Now think of the millions, if not billions, if not trillions of different ways that people can think that aren't as easily explainable with simple grammar. I was talking to two friends recently, and we were asked the question, what do you picture in your head when someone just says the word animal without any further context? My one friend says that he thinks of his dog. It's the animal that he has the most contact with. I thought of a rhinoceros, because to me, most animals have associations that go beyond just being an animal. A pet might be a dog. A circus animal might be an elephant. A wild animal might be a horse. There's many strange animals I would never think of, like, I don't know, when was the last time you thought of a pufferfish? And so my ideal form of animal had to be something that was not common enough that it had stronger associations, and not weird enough that I would never think of it. And so my default animal became a rhinoceros. This is the exact opposite of my friend saying a dog. He chose a familiar animal, I chose the least familiar. My third friend says he doesn't think in pictures and thus cannot answer the question. How do you feel about animals? I love animals, says the person who subconsciously conceptualizes the word animal as his dog. Animals are neat, says the person who subconsciously conceptualizes animals as his understanding of rhinoceroses. Animals don't perform photosynthesis, says the person who subconsciously conceptualizes the word animal as living things that aren't plants. Now extrapolate these differences between prioritizing the specific, the general, and not even being able to entertain the question to something more complicated than the simple question of what is an animal? And it's no wonder that people will look at the same piece of evidence and come away with different conclusions. Does the phrase, if you've read the books you don't know the full story, mean that the books are canon? Yes, says the person who subconsciously conceptualizes the phrase a full story to mean there is one story made of multiple parts added together. No, says the person who subconsciously conceptualizes the phrase full story to mean the truth. The thing we should be discussing is what the Steel Wool interviewee meant. And since we can't know that, it's a fruitless discussion to even have. So instead what people are doing is insulting people who think differently than them. And if there's one thing that we should not tolerate, it's people with this kind of supremacist thinking. I now think that we've sort of firmly transitioned away from Midnight Motorist to talk about the books, so I want to talk more about the books. After being in the community for a while, I think that I've diagnosed the major difference between people who state that the books are confirmed to be canon and the people who don't. For context, I do currently think it is more likely than not that the Tales from the Pizzaplex books are canon to the games. I've been saying this in months, both in videos and on Twitter. Despite thinking it's more likely than not that the books are canon, I still get hate messages online, and even threats from people who say it's confirmed that the books are canon. I agree with them, and they still hate me because I don't say it's confirmed. That small difference is enough for people to dislike me. And I'm not the only one. ID's Fantasy has said that she thinks it's more likely than not that the books are canon. I don't want to speak for her, and I don't know what she currently thinks, but she said before that it's in the upper 90% chance that Tales from the Pizzaplex is supposed to be games canon. But the 100% confirmed people hate us so much that they'll smack talk us, they'll insult us, they'll ridicule us, they'll threaten us with dog whistles. This small difference in opinion on the Freddy Fazbear books is enough to make people lose their minds. And I think I came up with a good analogy as to why. I think some people internalize ongoing mysteries like polls before an election. And I think some people internalize ongoing mysteries like the results rolling in on election night. What do I mean by this? Polls come out before elections and generally have a good track record of predicting the outcome. But in reality, polls are meaningless. Polls have no bearing on the actual election. The only thing polls can do is give people advice on what to gamble on, but ultimately, the poll number means nothing. It's a mirage. It's something we look at and go, that's the way the wind is blowing, but has absolutely no impact on the actual result. On election night, when the votes come in, they're counted little by little. We can see and we can chart who is currently winning. When 100% of the data comes in, we'll be 100% sure of who won. When 99% of the data is in, we'll still be pretty sure about who won. When 98% of the data comes in, we'll be pretty sure. When 97% of the data comes in, some people might call the election at 90%, 75%, 60%, 51%. It depends on how close the race is. There's data that we don't have, but the data that we do have is real, won't change, it's locked in, it's official data, and we can extrapolate from it a sturdy projection, like Kelsey. So let's use this analogy, this comparison between polls and results, to talk about the FNAF books. I think people who are unconvinced that the books are canon look at the evidence that we currently have like polls. It doesn't truly matter because it can still be wrong. What we're looking at now, before the election, before the release of Secret of the Mimic, has absolutely no bearing on the election itself. Tweets from the developer don't matter. Statements from the developer that they're aware the books exist don't matter. The marketing on the back of the books don't matter. The game is the game, and the game will answer the question the day it comes out. Right now, all we're doing is speculating based on what we think is likely to happen based on the weight of evidence we currently have. The polls say that the books are 60% likely to be canon, which is what I believe. But that doesn't change the fact that the day the game comes out, the opening line of narration could be, "My name is Edwin Henry Murray. I made the Mimic after my daughter Charlie died." And then that's it. The similarities between the stories, the comments from the developers, the marketing on the back of the book don't matter, because come election night, the other side won. I think people who are currently convinced that the books are canon look at the evidence like actual results. When the Mimic was revealed in Ruin, when the Tiger Rock plush was revealed in Help Wanted 2, when a Steel Will developer mentioned that they knew that the books existed, these add up as evidence that the books and the games are connected. They see that 60% favor of the books being canon and think that it's over 51%, so they've already won. The other side can't fill in that gap, 40% is less than 60%, so the conversation's over. This mentality has led a lot of people to tweet things saying it's 100% confirmed that the books are canon. Then new evidence comes out saying the books are canon, and they go, oh, it's even more than 100% confirmed. What, to me, would bring the results from 51% to 60%, to them brings the results from 100% to 109%. Maybe even 120%. We won already. I've actually seen people tweeting this. I'm not going to judge people who think this way, but I'm going to criticize people who tweet this and don't engage with people who disagree. This video is about what to do when you're wrong, or right. If the books are confirmed to be canon, that does not mean that their way of viewing the evidence was correct all along. I don't know who has to hear this. Actually, I do, it's most of Twitter. But coming to a conclusion with minimal evidence, and then sticking to that conclusion for many years, and ending up being correct, is worse and less intellectual than waiting for more data to be available. There's a reason that on math tests, showing your work is equally as important as getting the answer right. If we're playing Jeopardy, and I start to ask a true or false question, and you buzz in before I even ask the question, and you say true, and you're right, that doesn't make you smart, that makes you dumb. I find it highly embarrassing to look at ultimately inconsequential evidence and start proclaiming on the internet that people who disagree with you are stupid to the point where you harass and threaten them. It doesn't matter that one group was correct for longer. What matters is how they are right. What matters is that they can back up why they believe what they believe, and that they are right. Using the wrong equation and getting the right answer is a bad thing. In the same video we talked about earlier, MatPat spoke about how humans have a tendency to want closure. It's natural for people to want to come to a conclusion. It's uncomfortable to remain unsure. It's uncomfortable to the point where they would rather proclaim something wrong than be uncertain.
We as humans are pre-programmed to seek closure in whatever we're doing, and it makes us feel secure and brings a sense of satisfaction, of closure, right? Naturally, when we're faced with a series that doesn't give us any sort of clean or definitive answers, it's easy for us to want to find the simplest solution, or cling on to certain details like they're indisputable facts, because it's better to be wrong than to be uncertain.
So while they'll claim that they used facts and logic to come to their conclusion, they really just picked a side early on and stuck with it. If you actually care about facts, logic, theory, and science, you should change your mind every time new information becomes available. It's why you should never trust people who said they were right all along. They came to a conclusion without a rational reason to, and are now emboldened by their lucky guess. The reason, in my opinion, that the toxic side of the fandom are the side that thinks the books are canon is because they're so sure of their conclusion. Because if you're 100% sure of something, of course it's going to be frustrating that people disagree with you. Of course it's going to be frustrating that almost every single big FNAF tuber disagrees with you, and has spent the last couple years saying that the books aren't canon. It's going to be frustrating that the majority of the fandom thinks the books aren't canon. In fact, that's going to back up your belief that these big FNAF tubers are doing damage by spreading misinformation or even lying. Nothing excuses the insults, the nasty comments, or the physical threats from this small, very, very small portion of Tales Games believers. Nothing excuses the terrible comments, but it's natural that they're frustrated. They basically see people who conceptualize the evidence we have as polls as being election deniers. No matter what evidence comes out, both sides will see it as evidence that their side is correct. And so, what I've decided to do is just not engage anymore. I'm going to wait until election night. At this point, I think it's most likely that the books are supposed to be in continuity. I trust the polls. The reason I think this is because the counterpoint, the fact that there are differences and contradictions between the book and the games, can be explained away with poor communication. This happens in all multimedia franchises with many authors. And no matter what FNAF fans on Twitter will say, yes, obviously FNAF is a story with multiple authors, Scott Cawthon's not writing everything. I think the second most likely thing that's happening is that Scott wrote an outline for his story about the Mimic and the Pizzaplex and Edwin, and he handed the same outline to Steelwool and to Scholastic. And they both took this outline and created their own interpretation of the story. Each company adapted Scott's story into different continuities, with big differences based on the notes, but with a lot of similarities. And I think the least likely outcome at the moment is Tales fiction, which is the idea that the Tales from the Pizzaplex books take place in the continuity of the games, but as in-universe fictional books. As much as I think that is an amazing storytelling technique, I just think it requires a lot of evidence that doesn't currently exist. So, are the books canon? I don't know. Nobody knows. And anyone who says that they know probably views the evidence we currently have as locked in, as opposed to possible signifiers of the way that things will go. So now let's look again at 5 Laps at Freddy's. My Midnight Motorist theory is disproved by Falaf. But is the 5 Laps at Freddy's demo a poll or election results? My main issue with using Falaf as evidence is that the quality control for the entire FNAF franchise over the last few years has been non-existent. Thanks to Daco's second Scott Cawthon interview, we know that Scott had such poor communication with Steelwool Studios that they basically invented their own story, their own lore, and their own ending for Security Breach that contradicted the story that Scott wanted to tell.
I had a very specific story in mind, and it is very different than the one that got in the game. And I think a part of that is the way that I conveyed that to Steelwool, because what I was trying to do was I was trying to tell Steelwool to do specific things throughout the game, meanwhile not telling them what the story plot was. Because in my head, I was thinking, okay, when people find this, they will connect this to this to this, and it will all be revealed. And I thought I could do that without telling Steelwool the story plot. That didn't work out very well because they got all of these pieces and they thought it was their job to connect them in a way that made sense. And so really what you ended up having were the same pieces, but telling completely different stories. And since I was trying to kind of tell a specific story with mine that went a certain direction, they were taking pieces I didn't fully understand and trying to craft a story out of them.
It's also clear that Scott doesn't double-check all the lore references in the books because so many of them contradict themselves and other stories, and also just flat-out make mistakes. I think the idea that Click Team, the team behind 5 Laps at Freddy's, thinking that the fan theory that Orange Guy is William is correct makes a lot of sense. It's in the official FNAF Encyclopedia book. It's put forward by MatPat, as well as a lot of other big theorists like John FNAF. It makes sense that they would think that was confirmed and would put it in the game without checking in with Scott. I kind of doubt that in the middle of writing the second movie and working with Steelwool and releasing multiple books, that Scott would give 5 Laps at Freddy's a lot of focus. He said at one point that he went an entire year without communication with the studio behind the Into the Pit video game.
They would go into the hole for 6, 7, 8 months at a time, and I wouldn't hear anything from them, to the point where I thought, is this okay? And I would even, I talk to the other people that I work with, like, is this game okay? Is this going to be okay? Are they okay? Do I need to check on this? Do we need to check on them over there? But then I would get an update, and it would just be all this crazy new stuff and all this crazy detail, this fluid animation, and then we just repeat that cycle.
If 5 Laps at Freddy's isn't supposed to come out for another year, if it wasn't supposed to be publicly released at all, but last second was released during the anniversary just to include more content for the celebration, I can totally see a possibility that Scott hasn't laid eyes on the project at all. But that's just a possibility. On the other hand, Scott has actually addressed things like this before. A merch company put out a golden color kazoo that they named the Cassidy Kazoo. This seemed to confirm that Cassidy is the name of the spirit inside of Golden Freddy. Scott actually commented on this on Reddit. Okay, raise your hands if you'd think I'd let Cloak reveal lore using a kazoo. Never mind, don't answer that. It sounds just dumb enough to work. But seriously, I can't tell you how many designs I rejected because companies randomly throw around names from the lore. I'm pretty confident that I rejected this as well, or I guess there is a chance it just slipped through the cracks. Either way, get it while you can, cause I'm pulling it. So this leaves 2 possibilities. 5 Laps at Freddy's lore implications fell through the cracks while Scott was making the second movie, or the lore was approved by Scott, who is using this game to end speculation about Midnight Motorist once and for all. I don't know which one it is. So while I agree that as a poll it definitely points us in the direction that Midnight Motorist is about William Afton, I don't think that the result is locked in until the game releases. When the game releases in full in 2026, assuming it doesn't get delayed again, we'll have our answers. If all of these details remain intact, if the car is still called Midnight Motor and it looks like William's car, if there's still a Spring Bonnie head on the antenna, if the description that was extracted from the text files of the game becomes actually part of the game, and it talks about driving away from a murder site, then yes, Orange Guy is William Afton. There's no arguing with that anymore. The results are in. I'm wrong. And I've already talked about what I'll do if I'm wrong. But what if these elements are removed? To my knowledge, I'm the only big FNAF YouTuber who interprets Midnight Motorist this way. Everyone else has adopted the theory that Midnight Motorist is about William Afton. So what happens if the game comes out and these details are gone? Well, there's actually precedent for this. Again, with the Cassidy Kazoo example, removing the name Cassidy from the Kazoo does not mean that Cassidy is not the name of Golden Freddy. When Security Breach came out, the Princess character from Princess Quest was labeled Cassidy in the files. In a game update, this name was removed. This does not mean that the princess is not Cassidy. It just means Scott didn't want this file labeled Cassidy. Removing the name Cassidy from the princess does not mean the princess isn't Cassidy. Removing the name Cassidy from the Kazoo does not mean Golden Freddy is not Cassidy. Although I don't believe that the princess is Cassidy, I believe the princess is Vanessa, but that's a whole other thing. If these details in 5 Laps at Freddy's are changed or removed, that does not mean that I'm right and that Afton Midnight Motorist people are wrong. It just means that we're back to where we started, where I think the evidence points in my direction and they think the evidence points in their direction. And we can go back to that debate. If I'm right, I'm not going to gloat on Twitter or make a clickbait video called "Everyone's an idiot but me." Both because I think that doesn't help in discourse, but also because the removal of evidence is not evidence that it's wrong. I would, however, expect people who use 5 Laps at Freddy's as evidence to issue a correction. I would want them to walk it back, to say that they jumped the gun. Maybe they would complain about the fact that Scott let this slip through the cracks, that he let something release that contradicted the lore. But I would hope that they would not double down, or try to say that the lore was correct and Scott just didn't want to confirm it. We got too close to the truth. That's very silly. This video is meant to close the book for me on Midnight Motorist and the book canonicity debates. Because the fact is that 5 Laps at Freddy's doesn't come out until next year, and Secret of the Mimic, which comes out in about a month, may not even answer the question on if the books are canon. We might have to wait until Security Breach 2, and who knows when that's going to be. This is me saying, the debate is fruitless. If you're arguing in good faith about Midnight Motorist, it basically comes down to the question, did Scott let Falaf slip through the cracks, or did he allow it because, as he said in Daco's interview, he's being much more open about explaining the lore to his partners? And we just can't know that, so there's no point in discussing it. If you're arguing in good faith about the books, then the answer is, we just don't know. Scott Cawthon himself actually trolled the community when he addressed the book's canonicity. When asked about it, he said, "Concerning what people are saying about the canonicity of the books, yes, that is correct. I hope that clears everything up. Everyone have a great weekend." He was intentionally vague. Right now, there's a lot of contradictions between the books and the games, and a lot of things that line up. So the answer is, we don't know. And that only leaves bad faith arguments about the books, and those are never worth having. The number one response I get from people who think it's 100% confirmed that the books are canon is that I'm coping. The word cope is used as an insult because it's accusing the other person of lying to cope with the fact that they're wrong. They can't admit that they're wrong. It's too painful for them, and so to cope with this, they have to maintain the lie and double down. I don't think that's what's happening. I think everyone who believes what they currently believe genuinely does. They really think what they're saying is true, they're just bad at overcoming biases. I assure you, I am not coping. I am a 5 Nights at Freddy's YouTuber. If the books end up being canon, that means there'll be more people who are interested in the story of the books so they can understand the franchise, which means more people will want to watch explainer videos, lore deep dives, and summaries. If the FNAF books are canon to the games, I will literally make more money. I have reason to hope that they are. So I assure you it is not cope when I say that I don't think it's confirmed that the books are canon. My reputation isn't on the line if the books aren't canon, partly because I said that they are, and partly because no one's going to unsubscribe from me if my milquetoast interpretations of the books don't end up being correct. Likewise, if the books aren't canon, I'll say, yeah, I didn't think they were, it just looked like the wind was blowing that way. Not knowing if the books aren't canon is not saying the books aren't canon. So my final word on either of these topics until we get a real answer, I think Midnight Motorist is about an MCI victim. I don't have a solid answer on the books, but the thing that puts me over the edge to thinking that they are canon is that they're being treated as important. Unlike Fazbear Frights, which aren't canon, Tales have seeded ideas that have later shown up in the franchise, and I think this draws a distinct line between the not canon books and Tales, which makes me think that they're probably canon. If I'm wrong about Midnight Motorist, I'll say, well, I'm glad we know the answer now. I'm excited to come up with a new timeline. And if the details in 5 Laps at Freddy's are removed, I won't say anything, because nothing's changed. If the books are canon, I'll say, yeah, that makes sense. If the books aren't canon, I'll say, yeah, that makes sense. So I hope the books are canon because I'll make more money. I'm just not totally convinced. I will see you on election night. Remember that Freddy's stands for Friendly, Respectful Engagement, Discussion, and Discourse Yields Success. Freddy means don't be rude. Don't drive people away from the discussion. Respectful means not assuming that the person who disagrees with you is unintelligent, or doesn't know as much about the franchise as you, or doesn't love the franchise as much as you. If you want success, you have to allow your beliefs to be challenged. Thank you for watching. I'll be covering Secret of the Mimic when it comes out.